Outside the elevator, a woman waved, asking the man to wait. Watching the doors begin to close, the man remained indifferent. In fact, he felt a sense of relief once they shut. A little girl's balloon slipped from her grasp and floated skyward. The man simply walked on, choosing to ignore it. At the supermarket entrance, a shopping cart rolled down the slope. Though he could easily have stopped it, he deliberately stepped aside to let it pass. A woman handed him a volunteer flyer, but he paid her no heed. Then, one day, while waiting at a traffic light, a hand gently tugged at his arm. He looked over in puzzlement. Despite his reluctance, he slowed his pace and walked forward alongside the elderly person. The green light began to flash, and a jeep sped toward them, the screech of its brakes piercing the air. Terrified as he was, he instinctively shielded the elderly person behind him. Once they reached the other side of the road, the elderly person gratefully gave the man's cheek a gentle pinch, a sensation that brought him great joy. That evening, lying on his sofa, he reflected on that heartwarming feeling. The next day, he proactively held the elevator doors open, caught a balloon drifting toward the sky, and signed up for volunteer work. He picked up litter on the beach and played games with children. Tasks that once seemed like a nuisance now brought him a unique kind of happiness. One day, at that same intersection and the very same spot, he saw a version of himself from the past, cold and indifferent. This reminded him of the elderly person. So, he disguised himself as a blind man and reached out to take the arm of a passing man. Mother Sheep had sheared her little lamb, intending to knit a warm sweater for it before winter arrived. Tragically, the lamb passed away before the sweater could be finished. Devastated by the loss, Mother Sheep fell into a deep depression, lying in bed day after day, consumed by sorrow. When the mail carrier knocked on the door, she would snatch up her knitting needles and hurl them away. She refused to see anyone. Every corner of the house was filled with memories of her little one. She remained mired in grief, unable to move past the loss. Watching her from the clouds, the little lamb couldn't bear to leave her in such a state. While waiting in line, it borrowed an electric clipper from an elderly sheep ahead. It then hid deep within the clouds and used the clipper to shave off its own wool, imitating its mother by rolling the wool into strands of yarn. As waves of other lambs came and went in the queue, the lamb kept rolling its yarn, making the strands longer and longer. Eventually, exhausted, it fell asleep beside the yarn, only to resume the work upon waking. It tossed the finished yarn down from the clouds and began to climb down toward the earth, longing to return to its mother and say a proper goodbye. A strong gust of wind swept in, tossing the lamb about as it clung to the yarn. Fortunately, it made it safely to the ground. Eagerly, the lamb ran toward home, passed through the doorway, and finally returned to its mother's side. Yet, no matter how it waved, its mother could not see it. Just as it was becoming frantic with helplessness, a wolf guard caught up and forcibly dragged it away from its mother. It waved desperately to say goodbye, knowing this parting was forever. At that moment, Mother Sheep gently stroked the spot where the lamb had just been resting. In an instant, a flood of memories came rushing back. She reached under the bed and pulled out the half-finished sweater. After many days, she stepped out of her room once more and sat beneath the eaves, resuming work on the unfinished wool sweater for the little lamb. Meanwhile, the little lamb was being escorted by wolf guards back to the realm above the clouds. It sat dejectedly at the very back of the procession as the river drew ever closer. It was next in line to ascend to heaven. Just then, the mother sheep finished knitting the sweater. She held it high, and in the blink of an eye, the garment appeared on the little lamb. Overjoyed, the lamb realized that its mother had finally found the strength to go on, and it could now depart with a peaceful heart. Usually, when lambs cross the river, all their worldly possessions would vanish. Yet, as this little lamb crossed, the crown upon its head disappeared, but the sweater remained perfectly intact. For a mother's love is never merely a worldly possession. A man found he couldn't close the refrigerator door, so he tugged at the handle repeatedly. Unexpectedly, the handle snapped off and fell to the floor. The refrigerator felt like a child who had made a mistake, convinced the man would now despise it for being old and worn out. The man mentioned he had to go out. Seeing the brochure in his hand, which featured a brand new model, the refrigerator became even more certain it was about to be abandoned. To preserve its last shred of dignity, it unplugged itself and stumbled out of the home filled with memories. It wandered the streets alone. In an appliance store window, shiny new models looked down and mocked its shabby appearance. Back home, the man collapsed to the floor in despair upon discovering the refrigerator was missing. Out on the street, the rush of air from passing cars blew away the photos of the man and the refrigerator that it had been carrying. Fortunately, one remained. Turning a corner, it saw another refrigerator abandoned and completely wrecked and fled in terror. The man followed the trail of photos, searching for it. He held up a photo to the new models in the window, but they arrogantly refused to respond. Fortunately, a kind little refrigerator pointed the way, showing that the old refrigerator had headed toward the scrapyard. It looked at the photo in its grasp. Despite the reluctance to let go, it chose to discard it. The man reached out, caught the photo just as it was about to drift away, and pressed it back onto the refrigerator, gently asking why it had left without a word. The refrigerator took the brochure from him and turned to the page featuring the new model. Only then did the man realize the misunderstanding. He had simply wanted to replace the broken handle. He immediately installed the new handle. We often assume that what is new is best, forgetting that the time and emotions embedded in old things are the most irreplaceable treasures of all. An infant appeared on a tightrope, wobbling unsteadily and unable to stand. A sparrow gently pressed down on her thumb to help her balance. Excitedly greeting the baby, the sparrow flew ahead to guide her, eager to teach her how to walk. With the sparrow's help, the baby's steps grew steadier. She gradually grew into a playful, charming child. The little sparrow perched on her school bag as she headed to class. Catching the scent of bread inside, it found the snack, making the girl giggle with delight. In the blink of an eye, the girl blossomed into a lovely young woman, yet the sparrow remained faithfully by her side. Then, one day, she met a boy at a dance, and they fell in love at first sight. Unsure of the boy's intentions, the sparrow tried to protect her by pecking hard at his hand, hoping to drive him away. When the boy produced a spring, the sparrow was immediately intrigued, only to get the spring stuck over its beak, unable to shake it off. The boy helped the sparrow free itself from its predicament. Moved by the boy's kindness, the sparrow tugged at the girl's skirt, trying to bring the two closer together. And so, with the sparrow by their side, the couple found happiness together. But their joy was short-lived. War broke out, and the boy was sent to the front lines. The girl chased desperately after him, but the path was strewn with thorns that wounded her feet. The sparrow tried with all its might to press down the iron spikes on the rope, but to no avail. Life without the boy became a bleak, gray existence for the girl. Then, one day, the sparrow, utterly exhausted, brought her a letter from the front. It revealed that the boy had fallen in battle, plunging the girl into deep despair. Time passed, and eventually, fireworks lit the sky, signaling the end of the war. The girl gave birth to a baby, and the sparrow, just as it had done for her, taught the infant to walk. As time flew by, the girl grew into a frail, elderly woman. Trembling, she walked along the tightrope. Reaching the very end, she prepared to take her own life. Just as she stepped forward, the sparrow suddenly appeared. It pushed hard against her foot and tugged frantically at her skirt, signaling the old woman to turn back. The old woman finally withdrew her foot and tried to stroke the sparrow once more. Excitedly, the sparrow busied itself, clearing the accumulated snow from the clothesline until it accidentally bumped into a clothespin. Turning back, it discovered that the old woman was gone. It flew desperately to the end of the line, calling out for her, but she had left it forever. Once again, it was left all alone. Suddenly, a snowball came flying from the distance, accompanied by hearty laughter. The sparrow flapped its wings in delight and flew toward the sound.